Welcome back everyone. First things first, shout out to my mum for getting me this red tape. Very vital part of the whole concept here. And that leads me to go on to the theme of this video is, what do they mean cutting the red tape? Now, simply put, it means deregulation, going through policies and gutting out a bunch of it. And once again, the Australian government has done my work for me. This is primo. I almost couldn't believe that this is even a thing. So hopefully going through the Australian government's guide to regulation, which can be found at www.cuttingredtape.gov.au, hopefully we'll leave with a good understanding of how, at least, the Australian government views regulations and how they go about deciding on their policies. And then at the end of this, I have another one of my little interactive video game things, aka a fun survey, aka a way to force viewer interaction. Alright, this guide is from 2014 March, and look, did he actually have hair then, or are they using an old photo back then? Alright, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. I'm just going to highlight some really interesting and important parts and just some hilarious parts like this. You ready? This guide has been written to help policymakers see regulation in a new light. The government's righteous approach to policy making seeks to ensure that regulation is never adopted as the default solution, but rather introduced as a means of last resort. Cut my life into pieces. Anyways, regulation can have benefits, but businesses, community, organizations, and families pay the price for poor regulation. Regulation can't eliminate every risk, nor should it. We therefore seek better regulation, not more regulation. Probably the only thing there that I reckon you could salvage. Policymakers must seek practical solutions, balancing risk with the need for regulatory framework that support a stronger, more productive and diverse economy where innovation, investment and jobs are created. With this new approach, stakeholders can look forward to a future with sustainability, less red tape, and Australia's economy continuing to grow and prosper. Now, I love that this is from 2014 because how's that going for you, Josh? How's that economy looking? I know businesses are cheering. They have to pay a lower tax percentage than I do. If they're not happy from that, then fucking there's no pleasing them. We'll scroll past the content table and we'll cut straight to the meaty stuff. This is going to be interesting. The 10 principles for Australian government policymakers. 1. Regulation should not be the default option for policymakers. The policy option offering the greatest net benefit should always be the recommended option. 2. Regulation should be imposed only when it can be shown to offer an overall net benefit. 3. The cost burden of new regulations must be fully offset by regulations in existing regulatory burden. Alright. 4. Every substantive regulatory policy change must be the subject of a regulation impact statement. That's important. Remember those last 3 words. 5. Policymakers should consult in a genuine and timely way with affected businesses, community organisations and individuals. Hilarious. When's the last time Scott Morrison spoke to somebody on New Start? Like, come on. 6. Policymakers must consult with each other to avoid creating cumulative or overlapping regulatory burdens. 7. The information upon which policymakers base their decisions must be published at the earliest opportunity. Side note, I would love to see the information for where they come up with like NDIS funding for one, especially nowadays, and maybe the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. Where's the data saying that what they're doing is alright? I'd love to see that. Or the military. I would love to see why they need to give them so much money. I'd love to see that data. Regulators must implement regulations with common sense, empathy, and respect. Wow. 9. All regulations must be periodically reviewed to test its continuing relevance. 10. Policymakers must work closely with their portfolio deregulation unit throughout the policy-making process. See, there's some videos that I make that I think are really important because they work for us. Politicians work for us, the people. We pay them. They're meant to write our policies. So we have every right to know how they go about that process, have a look at their guides they use and recommend to keep in mind when writing policies for us, the people, and the corporations that operate among us. And with that said, oh, would you look at this? What do we mean by regulation? I'll put the bulk of this in the read it in your own time basket, but let's just go through this first line. Gold. Regulation may be defined as any rule endorsed by government where there is an expectation of compliance. This guide invites you to take a more critical look at regulation in all its many forms. Critical's an interesting word to use there in that sentence. Alright, moving on. Read this before you write your next policy document. The government has a clear approach to regulation. We will reduce the regulatory burden for individuals, businesses, and community organizations. From now on, cutting existing red tape and limiting the flow of new regulations is a high priority. Every policy option must be carefully assessed, its likely impact, cost, and a range of variable alternatives considered in a transparent and accountable way against the difficult position of no new regulation. As a result, every policy proposal designed to introduce or abolish regulations must now be accompanied by an Australian Government Regulation Impact Statement, or RIS. What's more, your RIS must have been developed early in your policy making process. The RIS is a tool designed to encourage rigor, innovation, and better policy outcomes from the beginning. In the past, the RIS might have been something you put together at the end of a policy process, just before your proposal went to cabinet or another decision maker. Now, the following RIS questions must be the starting point of your policy journey, and this guide is your companion. Alright, and now let's go through the 7 RIS questions. 1. What is the problem you are trying to solve? 2. Why is government action needed? 3. What policy options are you considering? 4. What is the likely net benefit of each option? 5. Who will you consult about these options and how will you consult them? 6. What is the best option from those who have considered? 7. How will you implement and evaluate your chosen option? I feel like I've gained that little bit more of an understanding of how cooked these dickheads are from this experience. Certainly, because from all of the bills and acts that I read, this guide makes too much sense of this is the things they keep in mind when they're doing their regulation process. Like, I could assume that this is what they do and keep in mind. I could have guessed this, but it's good to see that they put it in a nice little layout with the scissors and the red tape, and mine's better though. And so this video doesn't drag on, we'll move along to the new What Do You Mean game, which I last minute named No Tape, Cut Tape, or Criminal. Now let me explain it to you. I'm going to show you some old videos. There'll be A, B, and C and stuff. And in the comments below, write what you think they are. And your options: no tape means there were never any regulations to begin with. Cut tape obviously means that there were regulations, but they've gotten rid of them. And then criminal means there are regulations, but they don't care. And they're your 3 options for picking what you reckon will explain the shit fuckery that's at the core of the following videos. Does that make sense? Because then if it's something that I don't already know the answer to, we have another video on our hands. Alright, now let's do this. Alright, first one, Angus Gate. And that's pretty much everything this guide has done. So you might need to go back and watch one of the videos about him. And just as a whole, all the slimy things this guy does, were there never any rules about it? Did they get rid of the rules about it? Or is he a criminal? So we'll put A down as Angus Gate, and if you want, you can go into detail and break it down by each scandal. But for most people, I'll accept just the general A, Angus Gate, no tape, or cut tape, or criminal as a whole, lumping all of his actions together. Next one, B, the crap we're building buildings out of, and then therefore continuing to the construction crisis our country is facing. That will be B. Cut tape, no tape, or criminal. And then the third one, C, the corporations that can donate to our political parties. Is that allowed because we never had any regulations about it? We got rid of any regulations we had about that, or it's happening when it shouldn't. You have A, Angus Gate, B, construction crisis, and C, money in politics. I would love to hear from yous. Oh, and what would this video be without an example of them cutting the red tape? Here's one I've prepared earlier from video legislation. Side note, those videos are great because when I forget the name of the act, I just go over and get the frame and there it is right there. Because here's an example from Treasury Laws Amendment 2019 Petroleum Resource Rent Tax Reforms. Let's have a little look. Part 3, Application, Transitional and Savings Provisions. This is the bit we would call cutting the red tape. Application, deductible expenditure and accessible receipts. 1. The object of this item is A. To provide for petroleum resource rent tax to cease to apply to onshore petroleum projects as of the 1st of July 2019. I would love to see the RIS of this move right here in the Petroleum Resource Rent Tax Reform. Well, this has been fun. Thanks for watching. I look forward to reading your comments and much love. Have a good one.